Let's speak now to Tanmanjeet Singh Desi, the Labour MP who has just retained his seat in Slough. Good evening to you, Tam.
Good evening, AJ.
And Mikdad Versi, spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain. Mikdad, hello.
Hi.
Tam, firstly, tell me what it feels like. You've got your seat again, which is, a very important thing for you, and I'm sure you think a great thing for the people of Slough.
Oh, Adrian, I was overjoyed with my own personal result in Slough, and I'm once again indebted to the lovely people of Slough for having bestowed their faith in me again. But I was deeply, deeply disappointed with the national result, and to lose so many amazing, honest and hard-working colleagues who will no longer be serving their constituents in Parliament. So, yeah, it was a very, very mixed night. But overall, the feeling was one of devastation because there were so many people that needed desperately a Labour government for a whole variety of reasons, but we just weren't able to deliver. And now I think we need to reflect collectively on why our message didn't resonate with the British public, regroup and immediately start the fight back to ensure that in the near future we have that Labour government.
Why do you think it didn't resonate on the doorstep, that message?
I think the reasons for our overall loss are complex and varied, with different issues being preeminent in different regions. So, for example, in North England, it was about Brexit and leaving the European Union. That became the overriding issue. While in London and in other metropolitan areas, it was about Brexit and remaining in the European Union, which proved crucial. But also, we were battling with the fanning of nationalism. I think that will inevitably harm our united kingdom, and that meant that we suffered significant losses, especially in Scotland and in England. For example, in Scotland, obviously with the Scottish National Party and the demands for a second referendum there, and the Tories didn't help that with a counter here in England, and that's is to be lamented. But for others, it was about personality and the image of party leaders, whereas we did have some success with our core message around the National Health Service and protecting public services.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that issue of nationalism and how people feel at the moment. Mikdad, I want to bring you in here at this point. The Muslim Council of Britain has come out and asked Boris Johnson to reassure British Muslims of their place in this country. Why? Why would you even need to do that or think you'd have to do that?
Unfortunately, when it comes to Muslim communities, there's a real fear and worry about what's happening to this country at the moment. And when we have a leadership of this country which has allowed Islamophobia to fester in the party and actually become an institutional problem in the party without really caring about it, without engaging with Muslim communities, we now have members of parliament who were previously candidates who have shared social media posts from people like Katie Hopkins and Tommy Robinson. We have people who are members of the Conservative Party who've been let back in, having engaged in Islamophobia. It's a tolerated type of racism within the party, and that's a real problem.
Well, when you say it's tolerated, I mean, if people make Islamophobic posts, and there was evidence of this in the run-up to the election, they are usually dealt with pretty swiftly, and in some cases lose their right to stand or might lose their membership of the party.
I know that's what he said, but unfortunately, like with many things that we've heard, that's not proven to be correct and backborne by the facts. The facts show that many of the individuals, as I said, there are named individuals from a range of different backgrounds who have shared things from Tommy Robinson who are members of Parliament today. I mean, these are not things that are, minimal, small things. They're real challenges. And the party, unfortunately, has this real problem because whether it is at membership level, where we see that 60% of members have very vile views about Muslims, believing some of these conspiracy theories about Muslims. I think about half the members of the Conservative Party, according to one poll, believe one of the far-right conspiracy theories about Muslims is that these Sharia no-go zones where people can't enter. Like where these theories have become quite prevalent within the Conservative Party membership, and they're shared and they're propagated. And there's lots of examples of this. It's not just one. Like, there are hundreds of members who've been uncovered to have done this type of thing. Dozens of councillors, many candidates who became members of the Conservative Party, people who the Prime Minister promoted into his cabinet or into roles, aides to his government and to number 10. At all of these levels, there are a number of people, and they're all named in the Muslim Council of Britain's submission to the EHRC and work subsequently. And a lot of this is in the public domain, even if it's not collated and talked about in the same way as maybe other people might be aware of. But there is that scale of Islamophobia which is just being ignored. And
do you think in the way that the Labour Party was identified as having a problem with anti-Semitism, which is now being investigated, do you think that the Conservative Party's attitude towards Islamophobia needs to be investigated by the Equalities and Human Rights Commission in the same way?
Definitely. I mean, we submitted a submission to the EHRC to highlight many of these incidents and examples to demonstrate the scale of the problems that the party is facing. It's a serious problem because we go from the bottom all the way right to the top. I mean, when the Prime Minister himself is engaged in things which are highly problematic and has said things about Muslims and those of other races which are really problematic, these are things that need to be tackled and recognised and apologised for, and a recognition of this problem is part of the solution. When we talk about these things, the Conservative
what could Boris Johnson do, or what should Boris Johnson do now then, if he wants to reassure you and your fellow British Muslims that this country remains as welcoming as it ever has done to people of different faiths?
I think there are 3 or 4 different things, very simply. Firstly, acknowledging and recognising the problem, and that's the first thing, apologising for the part he's played in it, and then starting to actually deal with it. And the way you can deal with it, for example, is by adopting the definition of Islamophobia, which every other party basically has. The Labour Party, the Liberal Democrat Party, even the Scottish Conservatives have adopted the definition of Islamophobia, which the Conservative Party are refusing to do. Then it is actually policies. You know, when we have Islamophobia on the rise, over half of all hate against any religiously aggravated hate is against Muslims. Hate against Muslims has gone up by 40% according to the Metropolitan Police. Like there's a serious problem with the rise of the far right according to the security forces. So when all of this is happening, and just this week someone was arrested because they had engaged in, they were thinking of, they were inspired by the Christchurch massacre where people were killed in mosques. 50 people were killed in 2 mosques. Someone was inspired by that and had a range of weapons and was potentially going down that route and was just arrested this week. When you have that type of scale of problem, and there's a real fear within Muslim communities that now this type of thing, people like Katie Hopkins, who you cited earlier, believe that they've been emboldened by this type of rhetoric, that their person is the person who's the Prime Minister. When Tommy Robinson has said something very similar, when Britain First has said something very similar, it's very understandable why Muslim communities are looking and saying the people who are stirring the hate against Muslims more than anyone else in the country, they are the ones who are happy. They are the ones who feel emboldened. We need to recognize that's a problem, and those who are fueling that, those who are creating fire to that fuel, need to recognize their role in that and stop it.
Tamanji, the leader of the Labour Party, as he still is, Jeremy Corbyn, seemed to have a problem accepting the most widely accepted definition of anti-Semitism, although belatedly, eventually, he did. Without Jeremy Corbyn, do you think the Labour Party will still have a problem with anti-Semitism?
Well, look, anti-Semitism and any form of racism, for that matter, is abhorrent and it needs to be dealt with. And I am glad that we were taken to task for not having dealt with the problem as swiftly as we should have. And
well, that sounds like saying you're glad that you didn't do the job that you should have been doing as a party.
No, look. What we've got to acknowledge is that there are more than 500,000 members within the Labour Party. We're the largest party in political party in Western Europe. So we're going to have issues with certain individuals who do not represent our views. Anybody off the street can go online and become a member of the Labour Party. What I'm saying, why I'm glad, is that when the issue was identified and we were taken to task for it. But what should have happened is that we should have dealt with it.
I was going to say, I think the problem is, though, isn't it, in the Labour Party, is that yes, anybody can walk in off the street and become a member, but people who had what were regarded by many people as anti-Semitic views views appeared in some cases to have been tolerated by the leadership and those close to the leader. That's why it was particularly problematic.
Well, look, I know Jeremy himself has said on umpteen occasions that he abhors racism and anti-Semitism, that there is no place for anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. But, I'd like to apologise to the British Jewish community because it seems that we were not able to get our message across, and there was a feeling that we weren't dealing with a problem. But ultimately, what it also boils down to is racism in any party needs to be dealt with. But what I also want to take to task, and it was good to hear Miqdaad's views as well, is that there are double standards in terms of dealing with different political parties, and that's whether with regards to the media or the wider institutions. If we talk about Boris Johnson, he said, look, first bounce and you're out. But when there was a documented issue during the selection campaign of a Conservative candidate saying to another Sikh candidate that you're talking through your turban, and the likes of us raised that, Sikh institutions were livid, and the media, the Punjabi and Sikh media, that was front page news. But where was that ire? Where was that the level of scrutiny within our national media here within the UK? And when we were talking, and that, by the way, wasn't just on any random candidate. That was somebody who has served for 14 years as a minister, as an MP, has served as a minister. He has this year been elevated and is on the honours list. And lo and behold, we were told, oh look, he says he's sorry, and therefore that's the end of the matter. Well, that's not the end of the matter, because Boris Johnson himself said, first bounce and you're out.
Okay.
But what about the Prime Minister himself? He has a long list of sexist, racist, and homophobic remarks, something for which I also took him to task during Prime Minister's questions. But there was no apology, and as yet there is no independent inquiry into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. And I hope that the Equality and Human Rights Commission, along with the media, hold their feet to the fire. That, it's just not acceptable when individuals can get away with that, including the Prime Minister.
Okay, Tanmanjeet, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you. That's Tanmanjeet Singh Desi, the MP for Slough, retained his seat even. Thanks also to Miqdaad Versi, spokesperson for the Muslim Council of Britain.